So my three business books, the first one is about leadership, being nimble. It's about the mechanics of leadership, dealing with crisis, either internal or external to organizations, scaling, talent selection, mentoring, coaching, things like that. The second book's Be Visionary. It's about strategic thinking, strategic planning, extending your vision beyond 1 year, going out to the horizon, looking for threats and opportunities. So it's a good companion to the first book. And then the third book, Be Different, is about creativity. And I spent now 2 years and some change on the board of a group called Best Robotics that runs competitive robotics championships all over the United States, about 29 different locations. They've been around for 31 years. I am not a technology guy. I am not a robot or an engineer or anything like that, but these are kids from 6th to 12th grade. And they are given a challenge each year. It's a different challenge. And they have, 8 weeks to prepare it. They have to build a company. They have to build a company website, a marketing plan. They have to build the robot specific to the challenge. So every year the robots are totally different.
Mhm.
For example, last year it was trying to do like the Da Vinci robotic surgery um, process. Remote robotic surgery using the Da Vinci machine. And in this case, they were building robots to work on a facsimile of a human body to do all kinds of different medical procedures. Um, these events can have as many as 10,000 people showing up. They're usually held in arenas, things like that. And so I got pulled in to help with strategy, but then I went to some of these competitions and I'm watching these kids do this, and they're not taught how to do it. They're not taught, trained, they're not guided, they're not instructed by any adults. So it's a free for all among these 6 to 12-year-old kids, usually about 15 people on a team. And I assumed that they had been given instruction, that they had been given guidance by these engineers that created the whole thing in the first place 31 years ago, and the engineers that are involved now. And all they're there for is to be referees of the championship. They don't have anything to do with guiding the kids. So the more I started seeing this, and the more I started to, I stopped watching the actual competition on the floor and started going and hanging out with the teams around the edge of the arena where they were allowed in between each of their cycles into the competition to rapidly prototype and change anything on the robot based on their learning from the prior session. So they're sitting there with all kinds of little tools and materials as a 15-person team. And it looks like, a NASCAR pit crew. They're working on trying to figure out how to make things better, extend an arm, supercharge a motor, whatever it is. And this is what's going on in the fringe around the competition nonstop. So I watched it and I asked some questions of the kids, and there's no one kid in charge. So this is a natural collaboration, creativity, rapid prototyping and innovation applied to a physical task and a physical object in very, very short amount of time without somebody in charge telling everybody what to do.
I just finished my talk to Marty Strong. He's a retired Navy SEAL officer and a combat veteran. He's a novelist, a practicing CEO, and a chief strategy officer. The conversation was fascinating. We talked about kids programming robots, the psychology of perseverance, and what it takes for somebody to go through the Navy SEAL qualification and to become a successful CEO. This is going to be a talk you wouldn't want to miss. It was fascinating. Enjoy.
And that's kind of where the creativity and the innovation came in. If everybody was being taught the same thing, and there's other competitions in the United States that actually give them almost like a kit, like a blueprint, and they build it, then they go and compete. So really it's about your optimization and being efficient at creating the thing that you've been handed to create. To me, that's not really creation. That's manufacturing and production of the blueprints, product outcome, whatever the blueprint is designed to produce. In the best robotics case, it's a free-for-all. It's a psychological, intellectual, and emotional free-for-all. And the more I saw that, and the more I started questioning engineers, it kind of came to me that the reason they were able to do all this is because they didn't know what the rules were yet. They weren't constrained by breaking any rules in electronics or in software design or in the construction of the motive part of moving, for the robot to move around. Nobody was telling them what they couldn't do. They hadn't been through school for that yet.
Mhm. So
Nobody
they
had,
skip the process of unlearning.
right. And so there was no imprint, which left this wide open space for kind of a natural transformation very experiential, in the moment. And of course, the other parts, they had to build a company and they have to market it and they have to build a website and some other things. So it's a holistic competition. And I came back from that and I started thinking, well, I'm doing consulting, I'm doing speaking, motivational speaking, and I'm writing books. And one of the problems is everybody thinks that the way you get an organization to be more creative is you direct them to be more creative. You basically
Yeah.
create a policy, the creativity policy,
Oh,
and then you give it to,
we think we need processes for everything, right?
well, sure,
Processes and rules.
and I understand that. I mean, I'm a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, but it's kind of like, like one definition of a master artist is they know the rules, then they know how to break the rules.
Mm.
Well, the subtitle to my third book is How Navy SEALs and Entrepreneurs Bend, Break, or Ignore the Rules to Get Results. I was trying to capture what I was watching and seeing. And then how can I apply that to adult professional learning curves? How can I put it in place in a way that people realize they can reignite their own creativity? So I started looking into research and started talking to brain scientists, and which we have a lot of linkage to with Best Robotics. And that's not my day job. I'm a CEO of a healthcare company, but I
Yeah.
um I started putting down the bones of Be Different. And the more I talked to the brain scientists, I realized unless you have a medical condition like Alzheimer's or dementia, at 50 or 60 years old, you have the same biological mechanisms in your brain as a 6-year-old. And there was a study that was done not too long ago, which was kind of based on an earlier NASA study where they were trying to figure out how to create creativity, how to ignite creativity in NASA astronauts, how to get them more focused on problem solving as opposed to memorization of the rote instructions of how to do things. And so they did a test of 6-year-olds and 12-year-olds and, excuse me, 14-year-olds, 24-year-olds, and then 40-year-olds. And they gave them a creativity aptitude exam. And the 6-year-old scored in the 95th percentile. Extremely creative. Every single age group after that dropped dramatically. It dropped in the 14-year-olds, it was down around 75%. The 24-year-olds was down on 25%. The 40-year-olds was down at 5% or less. So then that started a whole other study as to how could that be? Is there something that is different when you're 6 years old and when you're 12 years old? Is there something mechanically different in your brain? And after years of doing research and concluding that it wasn't a biological issue, they realized it was compliance and obedience and conformity.
Yeah.
The stamp that all the institutional and social groups and context infrastructure, whatever you call it, around an individual, the influence that has. And as you go from 6 years old to 12 years old or to 14 years old, everybody around you is telling you you're never going to be a lead singer in a rock band. You're never going to be a movie star. You're never going to be this. You're never going to be that. And they're containing you and containing you and containing you. And in school, you're supposed to learn what you're supposed to learn.
Mm.
And if you look at the curriculum of school all the way through college, it's a history lesson in every category. You don't go into a room and say, let's figure out a new way to add 1+1. You don't come into a room and say, hey, let's figure out a different way to build a building or a different way to do advertising. What you're taught is the way it's been done, the way it's been done successfully, it's been codified. Read the book about the code, read the book about the procedures, the formulas, the accepted norms, memorize it, regurgitate it in a test. Here's your degree, go.
Yeah.
So, I thought, well, that seems a little drastic to say all that, but then the more I started looking into it, that's pretty much education is structured like that. The whole point of it being structured is it's structured. And if you jam everybody's brain into the same size mold, you get normalcy, which is also conformity. And then you get into your professional life, and you come into a company, and you just joined after completing college or grad school, whatever, and you're in a group, and they're talking about something, and then you raise your hand because you have an insight. Uniformly, you haven't been here long enough. You don't know enough. Thanks for go ahead and put your hand down.
Mm. Well,
You don't get invited. Go ahead.
there are schools like the Waldorf School by Rudolf Steiner who educate kids a little bit different, although now the educational systems, the governmental structures are trying to push them in the same mold and have them follow the same curriculum. But the kids that have been educated by this method, which involves a lot more freedom rather than, molding people, they've been outperforming on all exams. Well, I know specifically about Austria, consistently throughout the year. So there is a certain proof that not having children conform and allowing them more creativity, because in the Waldorf system, they actually allow them to learn on their own and solve problems like you're describing in this robotics group. It's a similar methodology. They have a lot of freedom there. And so their brains are naturally developed differently, as you probably know, because you're in contact with neuroscientists. The brainwave activity, the frequency, the cycles per minute are different with age. So it's interesting that only 10% of people remain to function at alpha brainwave activity after they reach puberty naturally. So these are the people that are actually not molded and conformed from the system, by the system. What do you think about that?
Well, the first part, I think there's always great exceptions to, I guess, educational conformity. There's always great schools, private schools, special schools where people are trying a different way, different approach. It's like the old Jesuit school system, which was about the way you thought instead of just memorizing everything. And then that's kind of come full circle in the United States in the last couple of years about creative thinking, or not, excuse me, creative thinking, critical thinking. But that's just thinking. The brain is wired to think in a very networked manner, not in a linear manner. It's not like a library. The brain isn't designed that it has a need and it goes back and finds the right row and goes to the right little box and pulls it out and pulls out a card, then goes to find where the book's been placed. That's not the way the brain works. You can turn it into a storage unit, but it's more dynamic than that, right? So it wouldn't surprise me that these kids were actually doing better in that kind of freedom. And the conformity and all these things I'm talking about are intellectual conformity and intellectual obedience. It's not go out there and break laws and go out there and do stupid
For
stuff,
sure. Yeah.
but the there's something that I learned from the brain scientist, one of the guys that I was working with. They supposedly found these two switches in your brain. It was part of an argument about the left brain, right brain being oversimplified description of how a brain would work. And there are two switches, and they're function switches. And one's called the task-oriented switch, and the other one's called the forager switch. Easier for people to understand if it's the explorer switch. And so it's been there since the beginning of, probably before Homo sapiens. But what it does is the one switch engages the brain in focused task-oriented work. It allows the brain to actually thread a needle or to create an arrowhead. The other one, the forager, is the switch that allows you to kind of set aside your fears and the risks involved in going over that next ridge to the next valley, because that's where the food is going to be, because you burned out all the food in the valley you've been in for the last year. And that's also why I call it an explorer switch. You basically say, I'm going to switch modes from a focus on safety and containment and understanding and knowledge and building and detail to the heck with it. I'm going over that ridge and I might get eaten. I may not come back. And that's a big swing, right? But that used to be a normal back and forth in early human beings. They would do that all the time. When it was time to do one, they would focus. But if you think about, we were talking about learning. If you've been learning the way we've been talking about in the more conventional sense, you've been triggering the one switch nonstop, almost to the point where the only place you're going to get rewarded for behavior is when the behavior is oriented to task-focused, task-oriented activity. If you do the explorer thing, the proverbial raise your hand with a crazy idea, the hand gets slapped down. And after a while, you say there's no good reason to do that because all I'm getting is a negative response. So now that really oversimplified in a lot of ways, because there's a lot of other factors that are involved in people, the way they apply themselves. But the point of the book is to bring you to, as an adult, to bring you to a point where it's okay for you to be different. Or in the vernacular of the old SEAL teams, it's okay to be unconventional. SEALs and Green Berets were used and are used for the Mission Impossible scenario, not for the regular mission. They have plenty of people that can do that. They have battalions and divisions of regular infantry. And, if it's a standard conventional job, they're going to send a standard conventional organization to take care of it. But if it's some kind of crazy, wacky thing that they can't do, then they come over and they say, here's the problem set. And the problem set, because it's put in front of you, is unconventional. It does demand creativity. And it demands a lot of risk too, because you don't know all the factors. So unconventional warfare and unconventional warriors are adults. I served with them for 20 years. They're not 6-year-olds. I've watched everybody take this and say, I don't know what the right rules are. I don't know what the right information is. Let's conceive a plan. Let's fill in the gaps with logic and some leaps of faith, and then let's go out and see what happens. And I convert that kind of scenario to business leaders. Rather than demanding that everybody comes in and have a memorized plan or whatever, bring them into a room and say, let's say this happened and we didn't know, like say, the perfect example would be relive the COVID impact in early 2020.
Mm.
What can we do? What should we do? What are we doing now? Does it matter anymore? The way our supply chain works, it doesn't work anymore. What are we going to do? We're just going to sit here and hope it all goes away? Or are we going to reinvent everything? To reinvent, you have to set aside, you have to be intellectually humble and set aside all your football plays and your formulas and everything you think has got you to where you are, because none of that matters anymore. You're in a new context. So adults can do it, professionals can do it, leaders can certainly do it, but leaders also have to create a culture of creativity and innovation in their organizations if they're really going to tap into all that energy and all that potential.
What does it take to flip the switch in a way from the conventional to the explorer mode? Does it just take like a permission or being aware about this other opportunity?
So I'm affiliated with another group called Best Mind Lab, which is trying to do everything we just talked about with adults and with professional adults. So we watch what happens with the kids, but the kids aren't undoing something, they're just rolling with it, right? And the adults, we have to figure a way to do what you just said. How do we undo? And there are scenarios that in the military, they will run you through scenarios and they'll keep pulling the legs out from under you to train you to not rely overly much on any particular assumption.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do that in business. You can bring everybody into a room and just do scenario-based training. And you say, okay, here are the rules. Here's what's going down. Here's the information. Study it and everything for about 30 minutes. And you have 10 hours to solve this problem. I want a new marketing plan. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into Canada with our product. You guys know the product, you know the thing. We're going to Canada. And everybody starts working. And then you walk in there and either somebody's in charge on purpose or you can also say nobody's in charge and just see how it flakes out. And you watch. And then about an hour and a half into it, you say, okay, you can't be the guy calling shots anymore. You can only be a follower. And you take that one alpha lead out of there because what they're doing is they're driving it their direction, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Then you come in about an hour and a half, 2 hours in, and you change one or two of the major assumptions that they've been working off of. And so their whole plan basically collapses. But they still have in 10 hours to produce a briefing on the entire marketing plan for the company to go into Canada. So you can see where this is going. It does reflect reality. It reflects the fact that, and again, kind of the comparison in special operations, the intelligence information you're given from the weather to the terrain, everything could be radically wrong when you actually get there. And sometimes it changes as you're getting closer to the target. And you have to be nimble enough, psychologically and mentally and emotionally to just go, okay, I'm going to roll with that. I got new information. I got to figure out a different way to do this. And in business, you could do the same thing. You could sit there and you could do scenarios about big picture forward future projects, like a major strategy going into another country, say, as a market. And you could game this thing this way until everybody in the room starts to realize I'm not relying on a list policy. I'm not relying on what I learned in college or what I did at the last place I did my work, which was just like this place. I'm not just going to superimpose ABC Corp's methodology on XYZ Corp's situation. And there's a point there where the task switch is not solving anything. And they have to start shifting to the other one. They have to start shifting to the risk taking and the what if, and let's go for it and let's take a chance. And if you think about it, it's just on paper. But human beings in those situations still act like it's life and death, like their job's on the line. It's interesting to see the passion and the fear and all the other emotions that are flying around when you take all these little, these little support systems out from under them, and they have to think their way through it.
Mhm. Marty, after this, we're already deep in the talk, but tell us a bit about yourself. You're a retired Navy SEAL, and now you're on the board of a few companies. You're also a strategy director. Why are you taking on so much work, or do you perceive it differently?
No, I don't. I know my wife doesn't perceive it differently.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I've so I was a investment manager, portfolio manager for United Bank of Switzerland for 8 years after I did 20 years in the SEAL teams. And then I did consulting work for a few years and then got into a corporation, started moving my way up. Eventually was the head of a large business development division, marketing, corporate communications, things like that. And then I joined a really small company as an equity partner, see, 2009. Grew that. The founder and I sold it to the employees as an employee-owned company. Um, the underwriters asked me to stay on to continue. At the time I was the guy in charge. So I stayed on, and about 6 months later, I bought a healthcare company that had one employee. So we kind of built it from that level of one employee. And long story short, we've spun out the original companies, and I've been the CEO of a management holding group with all these companies. Eventually, it was like six, and now we're just down to the one. And so now I'm the CEO of that healthcare company. And as this was built up, I was doing no other side jobs. And as it started to shrink back down and we started spinning all these things out, I started writing books, novels at first, and then business books. Started doing paid speaking, and then eventually started getting asked to join boards. So that's kind of the full arc of that story. And
So where are you based now? Are you in Switzerland or somewhere in the US?
I'm in Virginia Beach on the East Coast of the United States.
Uh-huh. But you're no longer engaged with the Switzerland
No.
unit.
No.
I see. Okay, well, interesting. And what drives you to continue on this path? Is it just
Um,
curiosity? What is it?
it's the challenges, I think. I wrote 9 novels, 2 different series, and I only intended to write one novel to start with, just as a challenge, just to try it out.
Yeah.
That was 4 or 5 years ago. And I think each of the different tasks, like the first business book was radically different in writing it than a novel. And I like being challenged. Once you become good at a thing, at least with me, I'm not very good at sitting back and kind of resting on my laurels.
Mm.
If you're good at managing, I think at the peak we had about 1,000 employees and 6 companies. If you're good at doing that and you come into work every day and you've got all kinds of surplus brain energy and you're just kind of, because you got good leaders and everything's working, then I need to have something to challenge me. I need to have something that I fail at, essentially, what I mean by challenge. I need to go and when I was 54, I went and for 3 years trained in Muay Thai and Thai boxing.
Mhm.
Um, and being a CEO and all the other things and walking in and getting punched in the face really kind of was a reality check at 54. Like, okay, so nothing's changed since I was 16 about
Yeah.
being punched in the face. So yeah, I like to do that, and I'm going to continue to do that. I'm working on another novel right now, so I'll probably keep doing that until the day I'm not around anymore.
Very inspiring. Let's get back to the last business book, the creativity one, because this was so interesting. What else did you learn from the children's teams?
Well, for whatever reason, I mean, I think definitely in the United States, everybody thinks that the aggressive type A leader is the profile that gets things done.
Hmm.
So if you look at a group of people and nothing's getting done, whether it's the movies and the culture, you think, okay, I need to find that type A person, drop them into that pool of people that are not doing much, and it's all going to take care of itself. And these kids don't have that. So how the heck are they getting things done then, right? So it defies the normal stereotype.
Yeah.
The second thing is I saw no conflict between the kids.
Mhm.
And nobody seemed to be wanting to be in charge and then being snuffed. They were all collaborating equally. You got an idea, I got an idea. You think that'll work? Yeah, I think it'll work. The next thing was the teams are in competition. I multiple times I saw a team that was having trouble or one of their like their drill or something broke, whatever, and the team next to them overheard it and came over and helped them,
Hmm.
brought over the tools or
Wow.
brought over some materials. I mean, it was just like a natural flow of this, you know, sportsmanship, if you want to call it that, but
Yeah.
it was really pure.
Hmm.
And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, where's all the aggressiveness? Where's all the hard charging? Where's all the alpha stuff? Where's all the because that's kind of what the culture says has to happen.
So
And
it's
maybe it
all learned.
does.
The aggressiveness and the hustling culture and the A type, it's all learned.
It is all learned. And I think in an emergency, if everybody's scared to death and one person isn't, there's that heroic moment where somebody steps up for the moment, does the right thing, points to the exit in the theater, it's in fire, whatever. And then they go back to just being a regular person.
Yeah.
But to think that there's an automatic requirement for that alpha leader
Mhm.
to succeed or move any human activity or endeavor forward, I think is a complete myth. And those kids helped me see that.
Mhm. And so in the companies that you're a board member of and that you're managing, how do you deal with situations where A-type leaders show up and you need to deal with this somehow because you know there's a better way? What do you do then?
Yeah, it's easier in the companies I've been in charge of because ultimately I have the last say because I was always at the top and in charge, right? And I'm dealing with maybe an A-type personality coming at me from the org chart trying to get me to do something. Um, it's kind of hard to intimidate me, so I usually don't have a problem in actually operating companies. On boards, it's different. So if you come into a board and that board is filled with accomplished people,
Yeah.
and in the case of, I'll say, Best Robotics, I was the only person that wasn't an engineer. So I'm like, what am I bringing to the table here? And they thought I was bringing strategic thinking and all that. I was because of the second book. They contacted me and then eventually invited me on. But they're talking about things I couldn't even add 2 cents worth of value. But once in a while, and more recently, I found that my perspective being different, my perspective, I don't have a dog in the engineering fight, right? I don't have a stand, I don't have a position, I don't have a corner to protect or to fight for. So I started becoming the kind of communications connector person by asking open-ended questions or asking questions that clearly lead to a conclusion that lightens the mood and kind of softens everybody's energy so they can all start thinking and working together. It's not like they don't know how to do it. It's just that now is not the only value I have. And they're all very passionate people and they've got lots and lots of experience in life and in engineering and technology. So I think I'm having a value add impact. And at least I've been told I have because I'm the odd person out who's kind of helping everybody communicate in a non-expert way. Because if you're an expert and I'm an expert, we're going to expert each other until one of us says, I win,
Yeah.
and the other one's going to say, no, you didn't. And then we're out of time.
Mhm. When you were a Navy SEAL, is there something else that you learned other than the exploring the type of approaching a problem? Something like, did you learn anything like remote viewing or other stuff like that you're now applying to companies?
No, I wish I had done that. Yeah, that remote viewing would have been helpful. See, we wouldn't have needed any intel if I could actually look at the target
Yeah.
or, and say, okay, I know exactly what it looks like. Um, no, I think the SEALs are the SEALs, all the different elite units around the world. And I've worked with GSD-9 in Germany. I've worked with the French commandos. I've worked with the SAS in Britain. I've worked with pretty much everybody, the Mossad and the IDF version of SEALs in Israel. They all have a different way of selecting who gets in.
Mhm.
And for SEALs, we have a selection process. And I think most of these organizations have decided to have the same approach. We don't bring them in and train them to be successful at the selection. We bring them in and we run them through a gauntlet of challenges that are physical in nature, but they actually are psychological and emotional in impact.
Mm.
And then we create this, and I was an instructor for the SEAL selection for 2 years, so I got to see this from the outside looking in. So you set up this gauntlet, and you step back and you let time and the weight of a backpack or the number of push-ups or the ocean temperature, you let that work on the population. So you have 120 starters. And they start quitting.
Mm.
I mean, they wanted to do this. They were part of, say, 500 people that wanted to get into a 120 person class. Only 120 people got in there, and only 15 to 20 are going to graduate.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
how do they get from that end of the pipeline in such small numbers, and what's the attrition attributed to? And it's really all between your ears. So at the end of that selection, what all these different special units have is somebody who is highly adaptable, has great emotional intelligence, and is willing to work towards a greater good, to a greater purpose, not just self-serving, and understands that the power of being surrounded by a team of people that are that way. Then the training starts.
Mm-hmm.
You
So
take that raw material and you can teach them to do anything.
yeah,
So you don't really know anything until it's time to the final cut. Then somebody comes in and says, let's teach you how to be a SEAL.
yeah. And so
If you're a
considering,
Marine, they teach you to be a Marine up front. There's a
mhm,
Marine way to think. Here's the Marine. So it's different. We're not trying to break them down or build them up or anything.
yeah,
We're just saying, climb the mountain. If you quit on the way up, then you're not going to learn anything from us because you're going back to the fleet.
yeah. And so considering that all of these people, the 500, have gone through the same educational system, what makes their psychology different than everybody else's, the ones who graduate, let's say the 15, 20 people?
Yeah. So there's been lots and lots of research done. And I've got my own personal opinion that kind of
Yeah,
aligns with
share
one.
both, please. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's one that I don't think has much validity, but that you have to come from a well-rounded family where there's lots of love and nourishment, and you have a really high feeling self-worth, and that prepares you for challenges. The other one is the hard knocks camp. That's where I came from. Divorces, other kinds of strife. There wasn't much money at home. You never knew what was going to happen the next day. Maybe there was physical abuse, or maybe there just wasn't any money, or your mom ran away, your dad ran away, and so what you had to do was grow up and face the world and create a self-image of yourself and say, I'm going to make it through all this crap,
Mm-hmm.
which was my scenario. And as an instructor and knowing the guys that were in my training class, the guys that graduated, about 85% of them came from that kind of a background, which would explain how they have the psychological resiliency.
Sorry for the quick interruption. There was a study also done that like something similar to the percentage that you're mentioning, 85% of all the people who made it to the C-suite had come from alcoholic families, from a family of an alcoholic abuse.
Interesting. Let's see, both my parents are alcoholics.
Yeah.
But I think and I don't think everybody, because if you have four siblings coming from the same scenario, you're not going to get
Yeah.
four Navy SEALs.
Right. Mm-hmm.
People make a decision, when you're the voice in your head's telling you that you're a loser, your scenario is telling you're a loser, maybe your friends are looking at what's going on and saying you're a loser, and you can decide I'm a loser, and then you're never going to go down a path to be selected for anything. Or you can say, the hell with this, I'm not a loser, and if my parents aren't going to help me get ahead and take care of my future, then it's up to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go out and get a job, and I'm going to hang out with people that are positive, and I'm going to figure out something. I'm going to join the military to get out of this mess, which is kind of what I did. And I'm going to make something of myself, and it's not up to anybody else to do that for me. Now, there is a percentage of people that came from the first category, but I think it's different. The nurturing kind of approach makes it sound like they were like helicopter pilots, making sure nobody got hurt and everyone's all their feelings were. But there's a old school approach to a nuclear family that's intact, which is you love them to death, but you also challenge them and you teach them
Right.
basic hard values.
Mm-hmm.
Like the quality of work, the quality of what truth is, honesty, and it's a harsh, straightforward. There are no exceptions. So it's a hard set of structures and values and everything, but wrapped in kind of a soft family that cares.
Yeah.
And there's quite a few guys I've met in the teams that they came from that kind of a background. Not abusive, but tough.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so what is your personal opinion? Is it the second one, or how do you
I think the vast majority
uh,
is the second one, the broken toy or whatever you want to, whatever. I've heard
yeah,
all kinds of different references, and it's interesting because they have to do psychological exams on everybody before they start.
yeah.
So these aren't people that are on the edge of tripping out or doing something crazy. It's
Mhm.
really they figured out a way to turn a really bad life or life situations up to that point, and they've turned it into a positive, into a positive set of tools.
Yeah.
And and those people usually think that way naturally by the time they show up as a 20-year-old. They
Hmm.
don't even remember how this happened, how they thought this way. But now they're with guys around them that are saying, "Hey, what do you think? I think I'm going to quit," and they don't understand why anybody would even consider that. So
Hmm.
it's like an alien thought process from these other, because they've now completely internalized this different way of looking at the world.
Very interesting subject. So
Yeah.
it seems to me that you've done a lot of thinking, and you attribute a lot of your success to psychology, and well, it's naturally this way. What is your upcoming book about? You have an upcoming book now. In this summer of
Yeah,
20.
that's the Be Different book about creativity.
Mhm.
It's available now for pre-sale on Amazon, but it comes out at the end of the summer. And and I decided I was not going to write another business book for a while, and because I've had three in a row. So now I'm working on a novel. So I'm marketing the business books, and I'm every morning I get up at about 5:15 and I start writing around 5:30 and get it all knocked out before the sun comes up, and I'm about 40% done.
What is the novel about?
It's a it's a thriller, and that's something I haven't written before. I wrote thrilling parts to stories, but I haven't read the genre of thriller. And it's a New York cop whose grandfather raised him, who's an archaeologist, and he goes to Cambridge University to the funeral. And then there's some suspicious things around his grandfather's death. And then another professor that worked with his grandfather dies in suspicious circumstances pretty soon afterwards. And it starts to evolve into somebody killed him on purpose to try to get some information about something that was discovered in Turkey at an excavation. And it has big world ramifications. It's about energy, a new energy source from an ancient situation that a new energy source is being sought. And think about how do you move around the big, huge stones of the pyramids. There may have been a way to cause those stones to be lighter and be moved with energy and everything from
Levitate.
sonic waves. There's all kind of harmonics and stuff. So
Yeah,
I took a little bit of time to research the science of it
yeah,
and the archaeology of it and all that. Put it all together, and
yeah. Very
that's it.
cool. Sounds interesting. Sounds very interesting.
I hope
And
so.
yeah, and what are the first of all, where can we find the books?
Yeah, so all my books are on Amazon.com, but you can also go to martystrongbenimble.com, and it has all my information on it, and it has the three business books, and it has two covers for the two novel series, and you just click on there, and you can go right to the other site that has more information about my novels.
Yeah, and you also do speaking engagements. What do
Yes.
people usually in what kind of topics do they invite you to speak on?
It's now because I have the three books out, it's kind of a compilation of the themes and insights from the three books kind of pulled together. And motivational talks. So I have a program called The Voices in Your Head, which kind of goes, and I started to allude to it a little bit, but
Hmm.
about, everybody at every age, even if you're highly successful, when you try something new or something falls apart, the voice in your head starts telling you that you're not going to be able to handle it this time, or this is the one you were waiting for that you can't deal with. Um, Trying to deal with that psychology of, do you listen to the voice in your head or do you become the narrative in your head? Do you drive it? So if you find that you're listening, then you probably need to stop and then start driving what you want your brain to be focusing on, and taking time to think about. And I'm not talking about affirmations, something that simple, but goal setting, recognizing a problem and saying, for me, I immediately want to sit down and start fleshing out a solution. I'll start doing solution design. I get a handle on the emotions that way. All the what ifs and risks start to get kind of lowered, and the intensity starts to get sucked out. And even if I can't get to a particular solution, I will then have something to go to somebody else or a team of people and say, here's kind of conceptually what I think we're running into. What do you guys think? Okay, how do we solve this? So I turn it into a problem that's a problem that can be solved mechanically rather than allow it to rattle around in my head as a emotional, psychological problem.
So do you think that you can transfer this knowledge and your wiring from your upbringing of this way of thinking to the teams that you're working with?
Yes, the scenario-based training, I think, has a lot to do with a positive answer to that question, because it's not just a speech. When I give a speech and I talk about the voices in your head or whatever, everybody nods their head. Everybody gets it. They've all been through it. Doesn't matter if it's in business and life and relationships. They've all heard that, right?
Yeah.
So that resonates, but it doesn't change their longer term behavior in any way.
Right. It's just
Yeah. So you want to do the scenario based training. You want to train them to think differently, and that takes a little bit of time and a little bit of commitment and engagement and investment. And unfortunately, my second book talked about how little investment there is in people in government or in businesses and organizations because of our shorter and shorter time horizon. Nobody's really cares about a year and a half from now. They only care about 6 months from now. In that mindset, why would you put $400,000 into training 60,000 people how to do something differently? You wouldn't, because there's no value in it.
Yeah.
And if you're a publicly traded company, you're burning cash, your stock price will actually go down, but you think you're investing for the future. The market thinks you're just burning cash.
Yeah.
It's the same thing if you're trying to invest in new equipment or whatever. So it's very difficult, because that's a mindset that affects the other mindset change.
Yeah.
You have to get somebody to understand that the value is there and it's worth the resource deployment. It's worth the investment. It's worth being put in the budget. And then you have to train to it to the point where people get it and they change their behaviors. It's not going to happen in one meeting, in one speech, or even one training session, but it is absolutely achievable. You can absolutely do it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, the short-term, long-term dilemma has been there forever. So I haven't seen it change in the past 15 years since I'm, observing the planning and the way companies deal with, so specifically budgeting and strategy. It seems like they're going by the book and looking long-term, but indeed they're all serving shareholders' interests short-term. So.
Yeah, the subtitle of my second book is Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. And the real theme is everybody's looking in the rearview mirror. Everybody's been enabled to optimize the history of things because of all the technology that counts better and measures better. And then the big leap of faith forward, the big strategic move, is to add 5% to last year's activity and say that's your plan for next year.
Yeah.
It's a linear projection with a little bit of a bump. The fact that you're going in the wrong direction in the first place, you've been going in the wrong direction for 2 years, and the competition or the market, the consumer is going in 20 degrees in another direction. You don't know that because you never looked up. You never looked up and out to see what the heck's happening. So you can optimize and measure and count and be super efficient and all that, and right until you're bankrupt. So.
And yet the growth under which the entire business and economy is based on, growth, and consolidation, and eventually companies being listed eventually leads all the companies in this direction.
Yeah, but there are investor entrepreneurs out there that know exactly how to do this, and they find a bunch of optimized little players in a market, and they swoop in and they buy them, and they attach them to some big audacious goal, and they fuel all that, and then they sell it, and because their goal is to build it and then sell it. So they take things of little to neutral value, cobble them together, And now they've got mass in the market, and then they accelerate the growth a little bit, and then they got this profile, and they either take it public or they sell it. Then they go into maybe another market, and they do the same thing. And they just keep doing it because they realize these are all diamonds in the rough that don't know how to accelerate their own value because they're not growing. They're caretakers essentially.
But
You
once
know,
they reach the stock market, they would continue with the same model of thinking short term, a quarter maximum.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, because that's what's rewarded. You short-term EBITDA and profits are what drive the stock price. The stock price is what drives the options values. Options are what C-suite executives get paid on is their bonuses. So if you want short-term gratification as far as your personal compensation, you have short-term objectives and short-term strategies. And as I said earlier, if you did the opposite, you'd actually lower the value of the stocks, lower the value of your options, investing in something that's not going to take place for 8 years,
So what is the
which
way
used
out?
to be
What is the way
the
out of
norm.
the
What's
situation?
that?
What is the way out of the short-term thinking of the stock market?
Well, if you change that which isn't, I think it was Charlie, oh, I can't believe I forgot. He just passed away. Warren Buffett's partner. He said that, anything a human being is incented to do, a human being does. Basic law of humanity and human nature. So if and the options thing came in the 90s, and that's when this shift happened. If you go back to the 30s and the 40s, there was a lot more founder owners of large organizations, and they had the long view. I mean, it was their baby, but then compensation shifted, and everything from the school system, business schools said, this is how you're going to get paid. This is how the compensation works. And so at first it was an idea of compensating with stock options. Then it became institutionalized as the way you get paid. And then everybody's horizon shrunk down.
Yeah.
So, if I pay you for how the yard looks for the next 5 days, and I don't care what it looks like in 10 days, you might do all kinds of crazy things, bring in plants and stuff, and it looks fantastic, but none of the plants were actually planted in the ground, and they weren't watered, they weren't fertilized, and then 5 or 6 days later, they all start dying and they start falling over, and I realized it was like a movie set. But I told you to get it done in 5 days, and I'd pay you for what you did.
Yeah.
So longevity doesn't get rewarded unless it gets rewarded, and you have to kind of flip that reward system.
Very interesting. Marty, it was a very insightful conversation. Thank you. I
Thanks
enjoyed
for having
I
me.
learned a lot. I enjoy learning new things. So that was definitely eye-opening for me. Thank you so much. Once again, where can people get your books from and get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, I just go to martystrongbenimble.com and you'll find everything there.
Fantastic. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Grow and Learn. We hope that you found our podcast informative, engaging, and inspiring. Our mission is to help you keep growing and learning, and we hope that our conversations and insights have provided you with practical advice and useful perspectives. If you're looking for personalized support and guidance to help you achieve your personal or professional growth objectives, I offer a range of services to help. As a trusted management partner and mentor, I work with businesses in the process of transformation, looking for new streams of business as well as M&A. With an extensive professional network of experts and mentors, I can bring on board the right person or team based on the specific needs of the company I'm working with. To learn more about the services I offer and how I can help you achieve your goals, visit my website at growandlearn.org. You can also reach out to me via email or social media. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode of Grow and Learn, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us, and it helps us to continue to create content that is relevant and valuable to our listeners. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to sharing more insights and perspectives with you in the future.